far my I could see. Out down the road, far my I could see. Hey, boom, boom, boom. Boom, 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 boom. Hey, boom, boom, boom. Boom, 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 boom. I looked down the road, far my I could see. I looked down the road, far my I could see.
You may know this one.
Something like it.
All right, here we are for the first ever virtual winter version of the Oak Park Microbrew Review. I'm Pete Crowley. I'm here with Gary Canine, Director of 7 Generations Ahead. Gary, take it away, buddy.
All right, well, welcome everybody. We're thrilled that you're here with us this evening. As Pete said, this is actually our second virtual, but our first in the winter. And we're really excited. We've got a great program. Pete's going to tell you a little bit more about it in a second. I do want to just shout out to Pete Crowley, to Jan and Stan for their great work on this event, and also SGA's board president, Mark Ledigar, who's the technical guru behind all of this, and Lisa Delighten-Brugman from SGA staff for all of their work on pulling this together. We are hoping, and fingers crossed, that come later this year, we will have an in-person event. But of course, all of the circumstances around the virus are out of our control, and we'll just ask you to keep posted on our website for more information as the year progresses. This original Oak Park Microbrew Review was started because we wanted to have a venue to raise funds essentially for the work of 7 Generations Ahead and our sustainability work, and also to marry the craft beer movement with sustainability. And so your participation in this event actually supports a lot of programs that we have been working on, including a new Chicago Public Schools Go Solar initiative, our work with zero waste schools across Illinois, our work with our farm to school program, getting healthy fresh food into the mouths of children across the state, and our work through Wasted Food Action Alliance to take food that otherwise would be thrown away and to get it into the mouths of people most in need. We're also working with the Carbon Free Chicago initiative that's working across the city of Chicago to really help our communities decarbonize, which we all understand in the threat of with the climate crisis is something that we're going to have to do on a very rapid timeline. So thanks again for supporting this event, for supporting 7 Generations Ahead. And now I'll throw it back to you, Pete, to tell us a little bit more about the program.
Man, all I do is make beer. That's a long list there, bud. Yeah, we're excited to be partnering again with SGA. We love the work that they do, and we love beer, so it's a great pairing. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a few interviews, a few panels, lots of cool knowledge, some funny folks in the beer industry. We're going to have an interview with the one and only Greg Hall, founder of Goose Island and then Virtue Cider. We're going to have a panel on wild beers. We're going to have a panel on hazy beers. And throughout the whole time, we'll be guiding you through tastings, and we'll be having a great time. And then it all ends up with some music. So sit back, relax, grab your favorite tasting glasses, and let's get this show on the road.
Hi, welcome to Revolution Brewing. We hope you enjoy On and On, our barrel-aged porter in collaboration with our friends at Half Acre. To further support Revolution Brewing, you can order from our curbside at revbrew.com. We hope you enjoy your time at the Oak Park Micro Brew Festival. Cheers.
Okay, next up in the beer lineup for our virtual Oak Park Microbrew Review is from the Haymarket Beer Company, Claire's Thirsty Ale. Very limited release, only 2,000 cans were produced. And this year, super exciting, we did a double barreling. We took some Woodford Reserve barrel-aged Imperial Stout, and then we put that into CH Distillery bourbon barrels. Then we blended that with beer aged in Blanton's barrels and beer aged in Woodford Reserve Double Oak. So a variety of 4 different bourbon barrels, all used, blended together with real raspberries. This is a really good batch this year. We're super excited about it. And it's pretty cool that it's in this 12 pack. So cheers, enjoy.
Hey everybody, this is Emily from Temperance Beer in Evanston. Thank you so much for participating in the Oak Park Microbrew Review. It's a great festival and we hope to join you guys in person this summer. You guys are drinking Title Track, which is a double dry hopped pale ale, which I really love because it's nice and juicy from the hops. We use Mosaic and Motueka, but it still drinks bitter, which I really enjoy. I like a bitter IPA. So enjoy and come visit us up at our tap room in Evanston. We're not open indoors right now, but we have a heated, covered, tented patio that is actually pretty toasty. And then we also have a drive-through and tailgate. So you drive in through your car, you can either leave and take your beer back home, or you can hang out in our parking lot and tailgate with friends and rent some fire pits from us. It's a great time. So enjoy the beer, enjoy the festival and all the other beers, and we hope to see you guys up in Evanston soon. Bye.
Well, everyone out there, for the this is our second virtual Oak Park Microbrew Review beer festival, and you'll find in your beer kit there's going to be a cider from Virtue Cider. So we thought we'd interview the one and only Greg Hall, originator of Goose Island Beer Company, and then moving on into the cider world. So before we talk about cider, we're going to go way back in time, Mr. Hall. I would, not to stroke your ego too much, sir, but I would say you're a pioneer in the craft brewing world. And also the beer and food
means I'm
movement.
old, Pete.
What's that?
That just means I'm old now.
Right. You're not good, you're just old. No, but you also were a big pioneer in the food movement of quality food with quality beer. And I wanted to ask you what inspired you early on to get into craft handmade beer, but then also realizing that the quality of food was equally as important as the quality of the beer.
That's easy. Chicago. You live in Chicago, whether it's our famous street food like hot dogs and Italian beefs and burritos, and the list goes on forever. Or the better chef-driven restaurants. It's Food Town, and I enjoyed a lot of it over the years. And pretty early on, I figured out that everybody had a fairly dramatic wine list, and you could get a cocktail there and a whole range of different spirits. But usually they would have two beers, Heineken and Amstel, and that was it. So beer and light beer. Back in the 80s, 90s, that's all you could get. And that just seemed ridiculous, especially as I started to see some of the Chicago chefs start hanging out at the Goose Island, original Goose Island brew pub. I'd see him in the restaurant, drinking beer at the bar. Charlie Trotter came in, Paul Kahn came in, bunch of people. And then I go to the restaurant, and lo and behold, it's back to Heineken and Amstel. So I thought, well, the way to get, when I asked them about it, they said, well, we're a restaurant, wine goes with food. And I'm like, well, I guess we got to make beer that goes with food. So that's kind of when that, it didn't happen overnight, but we started pushing it a little bit more, probably in the late 90s, and then going really hard after it in the 2000s.
Then let me ask you this. When you first started, I feel like the majority of your brands were English inspired, ESBs, Browns, Stouts. And then you started, in my opinion, one of the first breweries to really get into the super classic Belgian styles that not only were just a Saison or a Belgian wheat, but experimenting with different yeasts and bacterias and really exploring the depth of the quality of Belgian beer that also inspired more food. So what led to that?
Well, that was not only drinking that stuff in Chicago, but then traveling to Belgium. My first, you're absolutely right. First beers we focused on were English, with a little bit of continental stuff in there too. We had our Golden Goose Pilsner and Lincoln Park Lager, Vienna Lager. And then we were pretty early on the Kolsch thing back in '89. But really we focused on ales because that's where I'd been. That's what I drank at the source. And it's pretty easy to get from there, get over to Belgium and then Köln and into Germany. So really visits and then getting deeper into the Belgian thing and visiting these breweries and seeing, wow, these great mysteries are it's just a brewery. I mean, their brew house might be a little different. The fermentation is often very different, but it's just water, malt, hops, and yeast. It's like there's nothing we can't do that they're doing. We just need the right combination of water, malt, hops, and yeast, and kind of the philosophy of trying to make beer that isn't necessarily about intensity, but it's more about complexity. So kind of layering flavors on there.
Yeah, I feel like it's similar to Bannister and the 4-Minute Mile. Nobody was doing it. Nobody could do it. Everyone was afraid to do it. And as soon as he broke the 4-Minute Mile, I think the following year, like 7 people broke it because they were like, oh, we can do this. So there was a cascade of breweries jumping into this, and then also followed up with the move from English to Belgian beers was your use of wood barrels. And I guess, is there a story that led to that? Was it just like let's just see what the hell happens? How come we ended up with that side of the brewing industry as well?
Well, you've heard the Bourbon County Stout story, so I won't bore you with that again. But getting into barrels for Sophie and some of the other beers, that came from a combination of again visiting breweries in Belgium that not all of them, probably not even half of them, but a lot of them do barrel aging as a substantial part of their production. Certainly all the Lambics, the Rodenbachs, their barrels aren't really barrels; they're a lot bigger. But aging in wood had been a practical thing to do for a long time until steel kegs came along. So I figured we could do that too, and then certainly was inspired by those guys. But brewers like Garrett Oliver was doing stuff pretty early too, Herring, Food and Beer, and then our brewers, the guys on our team, guys like Matt Lincoln, he really did our first Sour Sister, a beer called Juliet. That was based off one of his recipes, and he's gone on to great things at Fremont Brewing in Seattle. Brian down at Weiner now, he's really the guy who came up with Sophie. Kind of he was tasked, as were a lot of people, with coming up with the saison. So he tried a lot of different recipes, and one of his was aged in a barrel with orange peel, and then somebody else was very forward with Amarillo hops, and then we said, well, what if we put them together? And that was how Sophie was born. So we had such a great crew. I mean, Goose has always been very fortunate with Siebel in town to be able to recruit a lot of great brewers. But back in the 2000s, that was one of the more special groups we had. And
well, that actually is a great segue into my next question. So many people throughout the years have worked for you, under you, with you, in both the beverage side and the food side, and they've all gone on to do great things. You already mentioned a few. I'm just wondering if do you consider yourself a mentor, a teacher, a proud papa? How do you, the list has to be ridiculous, the amount of people that have gone on to to make spectacular beer and food and cider after working with you.
Yeah, it's absolutely right place, right time. You know, I think if Goose Island would have started in Iowa City, where I was born, probably wouldn't have had that same level of talent come through. You know, the fact that my father never, you know, he always ran the business and I always ran the brewery. And, you know, he never got in the way. Got in the way is he was always completely supportive of any project that I or the team wanted to do. So that allowed us to get ahead of stuff and hire really good people like Mary Pelletieri. You know, we hired her right out of Siebel, and everybody knew her from Siebel, and she knew everybody, so it was that much easier hiring more people with her around. And she's really the one who did all the legwork on Matilda. You know, I said, let's do some research on how they're brewing with Brett. And she came back to me and said, I can't find any research on, all I can find is how to get rid of it. So, you know, that was back in the early 2000s. Yeah, and we just had a bunch of people who were interested in beer, wine, cocktails, food. You know, we had John Mannion at the pub years and years ago. It was kind of a short stop, but you know, that really at the time really elevated the food to probably as good as it was in the country for a brew pub.
I would agree. I mean, I would say out of, you know, the brew pub scene when I first got to Chicago in 98, 99, I would say, you know, even at that point in the late 90s, the quality of the food at your brew pub was what you would see at when you would go to like a fine dining restaurant, or you'd want to go to somewhere like, oh, this is like a foodie place and the chef's, you know, famous and the food's amazing. And then like you go to your pub and you're thinking, I'm going to get a beer and a burger. And it's like, holy crap, that burger was ridiculous. So let me ask you a couple more questions, sir, and then I'll let you go. I haven't gotten to the cider yet, but I wanted to talk to you about what led to really the sale of your brewery, and did that launch your cider career, or was that already in the works?
Well, cider had been in the works already for about 10 years. We used to take brewers on trips quite often, take them over to Belgium, did several of those trips. In 2000, we brought a bunch of brewers over to England and to visit English breweries. I'd been to England a dozen times already, but only one of our brewers, I think John J. Hall, had been to England. So we brought a bunch of people over there, and it was a ton of fun. But most importantly, we visited all these English breweries, and I wanted them to see not only, you know, what we were talking about earlier, not only these great styles of beer and try them right where they're from, but show them that they're not really doing anything we can't do. You know, even though like Fuller's ESB is especially over in England, is one of the most amazing beers ever. When you go into the brewery and you see how they're brewing it, you're like, well, we can do all that stuff, you know, so let's try doing it. And even beers like Old Peculiar. But on that trip, we were up in Yorkshire. We'd just seen Old Peculiar and Black Sheep, and down to Tadcaster, Sam Smith. But in the city of York, we went into a pub called the Maltings, of all things, and they were having a cider festival. So it's just a pub with a cider festival, just like thinking back to like the early years of Festival of Barrel Aged Beer, and you know, that was in a pub, right? So and basically,
Absolutely.
we've got this guy to thank for that. He, you know, I had some good ideas over time, but it's guys like Pete who actually do all the work to make those ideas come true. And I think your idea on the festival, and it was certainly your execution of it. So cheers to you.
I was actually gonna. Well, cheers to you. I was actually gonna bring that up because I think you're misremembering the exact reason why it all began. We were talking about it, and I was president of the guild, and you said we should do a festival with just barrel-aged beers. You said that.
Oh, okay.
I didn't come up with the idea. I was like, oh, well, I can do that. All I need is a bunch of beer and volunteers, right? So we talked to all the home brewers in the area. They all volunteered. They all talked to all their brewery friends that they knew all over the country. And all of a sudden we got Sam Adams, Utopias, and La Folie from New Belgium and all these beers. But it was definitely, this is one of my other questions I was going to bring up. It was definitely you that was like, hey, you guys should do a festival. I was like, all right, we'll do all the work. Fine. Okay. And then you ended up hosting it for years.
Yeah. That was a absolute riot. That was a ton of fun, especially in those early years. When it was, we were also doing the Real Ale Festival with Ray Daniels at the time. And Goose Island Wrigleyville was the perfect space for it.
And honestly, both of those were like one of a kind festivals in the whole country. Like there's nothing like it.
Yeah. Well, it was the second biggest real ale fest in the world after GBBF. I think we had guys like Roger Protz coming over for it.
Oh, there were some heavy hitters coming in from England for that. I remember some of the judges. Hi. We're enjoying the fire pit season. Are you getting some fire pit action over at the Virtue?
I think we've got 13 or 15 fire pits. I've got my little fireplace going right here in the porch. So,
well, it wouldn't be a timely interview if I didn't ask you the COVID question. How are you guys holding up? Customers just want to come anyway and sit out in the snow, or I mean, how are things going up in Fenville?
We've always, it's Michigan. You're a Michigander now too. Michigan people, it's not, it's never the weather the problem. It's your clothes are the problem.
That's it. Can I put that on a T-shirt? Is that a thing? It's the first time I've heard that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like, of course we sit outside in the winter. That's the best time to sit outside. You just put in some long johns or some coveralls and, warm enough. Burn some wood. There's plenty of wood in Michigan to cut down and burn, or clear and burn.
I spent 2 hours this morning splitting wood.
I just came in from it. Probably still got some on my shirt. But yeah, absolutely. That's what we do up here. So, we built fire pits and they fill up. People want to sit around. Absolutely. We've got a couple of little greenhouses too. So we're open. We're certainly not as busy as we are in tourist season in the summer or in the fall when we are in the middle of harvest. But we're steady all the time. People come in.
A couple of random questions just to throw at you, see if you're on guard or not. What beer that you've made in your career are you most proud of?
Bourbon County certainly influenced a lot of the beer community. So I think that's up there. But I think also, Matilda and Sophie really helping bridge the way from beer into the restaurant, opening those restaurant doors.
Sure.
Now there's no restaurants that don't have local craft beers on. They don't have Heineken and Amstel anymore. I don't even know if Amstel exists, but
I'm sure it does. No, I know that's very fair. How about cider, which is your? I was gonna guess Lafayette, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, Lafayette. I'd say Lafayette and the Mitten, both of those.
Okay.
Lafayette. We wanted to go. I spent a lot of time after I left Goose over in England and France, visiting cider makers and kind of developing contacts over there, so I could have mentors. And Tom Oliver was certainly my English mentor. And then I was lucky enough to talk the people at DuPont into a little stage over there. So I came back in the fall after visiting in the summer and worked there for a couple, 2-3 weeks. And the French ciders that were not necessarily apple forward, they were more funk forward. There's a lot of barrel character in the cider. All these just travel around to Normandy, and you'd have all these little tiny cider makers who were farmers, and you'd have to like go and honk the horn 3 times, and then old lady'd come out because her son was out on the tractor somewhere, and she'd like go and sell you 3 bottles of cider, that were coming out of the 8 barrels that they had in their barn next to the chickens and the goat feed. It's just crazy. So I want to do something like that, make cider very agriculturally and get notes of the farm and the fermentation and the barrel as well as the apple.
Well, I think you've accomplished that. If anyone watching this hasn't been up to Fenville, you got to come check out the cider. Is it a cider plant?
Cider house.
Cider house.
The farm.
It's a great spot. Really appreciate your time, sir.
Only about 45 minutes from you, right?
Yeah, it's really close. You're going to have to drive by my place to get to your place. So you can stop here and get a pizza and a beer and then go up to your place. I would say if we could get everything that's inside your head and put it into a book, it'd probably be a very big resource for the entire world. So please
I'll try to
think about
squeeze some up.
Well, thanks for your time, man. Much respect. I love you. We've known each other for a long time.
Pete,
I can't wait to see you, man.
Yes, and maybe I'll come down and bring those cases to you because I'm way overdue for a visit.
All right. Sounds great, brother.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, brother. Thank you so much. Cheers.
Cheers.
Excellent. Next up is Cranberry Fox in the Snow from Off Color. This is a fooder-aged wild ale. It's re-fermented with cranberries. So it's in the creek style, which typically would have cherries. This has cranberries to give it a nice sort of fun winter tartness.
Wow.
So Pete, the Flanders region of Belgium, Dutch-speaking North Belgium, is sort of the namesake of this beer. Tell us more.
It's delicious. It's a little tart. It's aromatic. It's wild sour from Distill.
This is going to be a fun, wild panel. 2 of the brewers that are in your box, Mr. Matt Potts from Distill and Mr. John Laffler from Off Color, are joining us. And hopefully you have those beers ready to sample. And then our moderator and our star presenter here, Mr. Jeff Sparrow, who literally wrote the book on wild brews, is here with us, and we're going to get rolling. So Jeff, how do you want to begin, sir? It's your show.
My show.
Okay, well, always begin with drinking a beer. You're very right. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, I put together some questions, a couple of you suggested, some other ones I thought about here. So going through the panel format here, we wanted to have you lads tell us about, and we're going to talk about the concept of wild and sour in a minute, but tell us about some of the beers that inspired you. I'm going to go first with mine, and this is going to be the beer I think is the finest beer in the world, and that is Cantillon Goose, that set me down this long path of wild beers. I'd like to hear some of the ones that inspired you to do what it is you do?
Well, you stole one of mine, but you're wearing the T-shirt, so I'll give you the props, I guess. But yeah, Cantillon for me was always one of my favorites as well, as far as barrel aged sours. In terms of Gosa, is probably Westbrook's. Certainly, their canned Gosa is one of the best examples out there. So obviously, our wild sour Gosa is one of our biggest sellers. So, but I got to give a lot of props to Westbrook's as well. So,
how about you, Mr. Lafler?
Mine's more like Jolly Pumpkin Bam beer.
Oh yes.
Yeah, I still remember the first time I ever had it, sitting at a bar in Madison, and having that quintessential like this is beer moment. Just blew my mind, and yeah, it's always been very inspiring.
Yeah, Ron makes some crazy deliciousness. I would actually, just to, before we get going too deep, I mean, honestly, I think probably now's the time to talk about it. We say wild sour, wild sour, wild sour. What are we talking about?
And when Wild Brews came out, we talked about Lambic, we talked about Flanders, we talked about how to replicate these things in America or even at home. And there was no real designation. I just didn't want to call them sour. There's a lot of people in Belgium, especially, just took real affront to that. And then the BA a couple of years ago decided that wild meant spontaneous and sour meant not spontaneous. And you've had a lot of really nice spontaneous breweries popping up. One that comes to mind is a place called De Garde out in Tillamook, Oregon, who's making some fabulous beers. So I want to ask you guys, more importantly than just that designation, what about this concept of funk versus acid? You know, classically you got acid in beers and it made them sourish, tart, complex, and other things going on. But now you have this concept of funk that's a little different. What can you guys tell me about that?
I'll jump in because we've done both. Obviously, the kettle sours. You know, we can get into that in a little bit. Then Saint Decara Reserve sour ales as well. Those are not 100% spontaneous, so we do a primary fermentation like you would really with any other beer. But the making them funky or getting the horse blanket and getting the Brett involved and some acidity, like you're saying, is all that's like a natural or a spontaneous secondary fermentation in oak. So we've, to this day, we've never bought a sour culture. We've never bought Brett from a lab, anything like that. All of our culture at Distill, including for our wild sours, even our kettle sours, are our own culture that we have in Central Illinois. But yeah, I don't think a lot of people expect that even with our wild sour series, the kettle sours, that they even would not just be made with some lacto or, you know, bought from a lab or pitching in yogurt or whatever, but it's actually a culture that we harvested from some of our Saint Decara barrels, and we left our kettle open to atmosphere for several days while we tried to grow that culture. So we've kept that culture going in the same little 7-barrel storage tank. I think it's been in that tank since about 2015, maybe March of that year, without ever being open. So we draw from it, feed it, draw from it, feed it. But yeah, Saint Decara is completely different. You know, barrel aged sours, more of what I know John's going to speak to as well. With Saint Decara, is like I said, it's we're getting those barrels in from whether it's a winery or maybe we're using some of our Dos Vidani barrels or whatever.
But John, let me hear what you have to say about what do you call your beers and how do you make that distinction?
Look, first, yes, you can put a quarter of me and I will go off on this for hours, obviously. But I think it's great that we even have such high level of beer literacy now that this is a question to hash out. Because 10 years ago, these beers barely existed in the United States, and now they're beyond plentiful. As such, I think the terminology has changed and adjusted over the time. And again, that's a good thing. We don't tend to use the term sour. We don't use that as a noun. That's just one of my personal things. I think sour is a flavor description, not a type of beer. But again, that's just our personal opinion. Where we have started going more is looking into, well, what does wild mean and how can we delineate between the different types? Because we have, lab-grown Brett, and at some point, Brett Brooks was a free-floating organism in the air, presumably in cherry orchards in Brussels. It sounds very gorgeous. It might be true, might not. But at a certain point, I order it from a lab like I order any other sack strain. So at a certain point, the question becomes like, well, is that really wild anymore? How domesticated has that become? So we just in-house though only refer to wild stuff if it has a sort of non-laboratory origin. So if it's coming from old barrel stock, if it's coming from a spontaneous culture, yada yada. But if we're dialing up a lab and ordering it, we tend not to refer to that as wild anymore. However, I will go ahead and say that we have now banked our one of our native strains. So I am being entirely hypocritical because I now have the ability to just order that from a lab. It is wonderful.
What do you call your beer then if it's not wild or sour? Just beer?
We make American wild ales.
So you do say American wild.
Yeah, we also make a funky farmhouse ale because sometimes our saisons aren't using what we are now referring to as wild culture. And again, this is a terminology shift we've done ourselves in-house. So things we did 5 years ago, we're talking about in explaining in different ways than we are now.
What makes something American other than being brewed in America? Like, is a Belgian ale only Belgian if it's brewed in Belgium?
I think American wild ale is now like a distinct style and approach to beer making as opposed to the Belgian approaches or European approaches. Yeah. I think it's much more brash. It has much higher acidity or range of acidity. I think it has a lot more bitterness, a lot more malt character at times. Like it can run the gamut, and we can get into the minutiae on that if people want. But I do think it's been around long enough, and there you can see a different type of beer emerging than say something coming out of whatever somewhere in Belgium.
The last time I was in Brussels, this brewery on the corner from Cantillon, he said, "You got to try our Dortmund." And I'm like, a Dortmund in the shadow of Cantillon. How awesome. And it was really good too.
Well, Matt, what do you consider yours? Are you American wild? What are you making?
Well, they're Belgian style. Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting to watch how even the GABF has, changed the definitions, and it's always been kind of difficult to, do you put your beers in some Belgian sour categories or the American sour category? I think with the wild sours, we've had pretty good luck with entering those in just American sour categories, but pretty much anything we're barrel aging, we generally think of those as more Belgian style. Again, they're brewed in America. Again, you can kind of get into how do you really approach them, but yeah, it's we appreciate all the different versions of styles, whether they're obviously we love even the kettle sours, but on more of the spontaneous side of things. We've got 2 cool ships down here in Central Illinois as well that we're starting to play with. Those are in the barrels now, so really excited about seeing what those do. We've also got metallurgy sours, which are actually, again, we'll do a primary fermentation, but then the souring and making them funky, all we're doing there is relying on the wild yeast and bacteria that's on fruit skins. So those are a little different than Saint Decara, where with Saint Decara, we're just literally relying on what's in our air here that gets into the barrel. And then again, we've already gone through Saint Decara. So it's just kind of fun to see what different processes will do and with different and what the different results are going to be. Very different results. I tend to really love that funky horse blanket. It's kind of difficult to describe that to people that aren't familiar with sours. Like, why would I want to drink anything with the horse blanket? But I love that complexity. Jeff's used to that, I know, but I love that complexity. Whereas the wild sours, you don't have that complexity that you get with Brett and whatever. Even though we know that there's Brett and wild yeast in our culture, but it doesn't have time to work on a kettle sour process. So the wild sours tend to be more like sour candy, like just really super sour and acidic, without that degree of funkiness that you're going to get with any of the, like our metallurgy or Saint Decara. So
it sounds like we're doing something similar to what Matt's doing. What we started calling like native fermentations, where we're taking taking yeast off of fruit skins and that sort of thing, where the yeast are coming directly from nature. So, I mean, I think that's a very similar thing. When we do Lactobacillus fermentations, just a similar methodology to what you do with kettle souring, pre-acidifying wort and then boiling it. Again, very similar thing where we have a lacto culture, which is, at one point we bought lacto. That was we bought a picture of it when we very, very first started and put it into a tank, and that tank has never been empty. We do the same sort of Solera method. It sounds like they're doing. Yeah. And yeah, that part's really nice because it is very consistent. We sort of learned to work with it over the years. And it can create a fair amount of acid very quickly and very controllably. Similarly, it doesn't have time to funk up in the same way as a longer term beer does. But it's nice methodology to make Berliner Weiss and those sorts of beers. We use it for our Goza, obviously. So, yeah.
Jeff, do you have one more question before these guys just give a brief chat about what beers they're sending us?
And let me just ask you two pointed, one's pointed, one's not so much. Do you think barrel-aged beers taste more what than beer fermented in stainless? I have a word, but I don't want to put it out. What do you both think?
I think even beer done in sort of very neutral, very used up oak still has more maturity, or it tastes to me, I don't know a better way of putting it than mature, than beers done in completely in stainless. From a technical standpoint, you always have a little bit of oxygen ingress over time, which you don't have in stainless, or at least really hope you don't have in stainless, otherwise you're doing something very wrong. So the beers will always taste different than if they're done in a pure CO2, purely sterilizable environment.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because we've got two, funky styles again, like I said, like metallurgy and then Saint Decara. So the processes are very similar, but metallurgy, the reason we named it that is because we're doing that process in stainless, whereas Saint Decara is all in oak barrels. So it's really interesting to see the same type of process, but in completely different vessels. So what's really cool about metallurgy is it's just the pure process of making the beer sour really funky without the influence or modification by oak, which is really interesting. They're really clean and pure in that way. Of course, I love the complexity that oak's going to get, obviously the tannins and everything that you already said, John. And then whatever was in the barrel before is always going to be a factor, whether it was wine or whatever beer it was. So that that's always kind of a cool addition that you're going to get with oak versus stainless. So anyway, it is interesting. And then obviously kettle sours are all stainless. So
I would never realize that you had that complex of a culture in your kettle sours.
Yeah, most people don't really. I think that's why we need to put the can label on the tank so people, when they're touring the brewery, can kind of maybe wonder what's in that tank. But yeah, whether it's brewers at Jester King or whatever, they're always kind of shocked to hear that as well. And it is odd because it'd be so much easier, really, just to get a culture of lacto and throw it in. But if we were going to put the name Wild on that, it wasn't. We didn't want to call it that unless it was really true to that. And so that's why we kept our, Wild culture to make the Wild Sour series. So it's not just a cutesy little name. It actually has some history behind it.
Yeah. And John, I had a beer here that was called Critters. Tell me about that one.
Critters is that native yeast strain that was recently harvested from some blueberry skins, which we then had actually in that foeder for a long time. Then we got that banked, and we've been using that in a funky wit bear called Critters, which now sometimes lives in that other one over there. But we started doing Critters in stainless, and it certainly tastes different than the foeder stuff, 100%.
If you guys could just give me a quick, what beer are people going to taste? Just like 20 seconds. John, you go first.
We have is Cranberry Fox in the Snow, which is a sort of Flemish style malty-ish brown ale aged in vat foeder. And then so it solidifies from there, and it's in foeder for about 9 to 12 months, and then we rack it to stainless, re-ferment with cranberry juice, and then that's all you guys have. Hope you enjoy.
Matt?
So you've got 3 wild sours that you're trying. The first one's wild sour, the triple berry. So it literally has 3 berries in it. Oh, there it is. See, very colorful. So this one though is interesting because we actually have lactose in it as well to kind of help sweeten up the beer a little bit and balance the acidity. So it's really kind of a fun beer. So that's why I want to make sure that that got to the event that you're having. Second one is wild sour Flanders Red, which has always done really well in Chicago. Been written up by the Chicago Trib or at least once, I think. So this, it's kind of the malt bill, everything about it is very traditional, but it's done in the kettle sour way. So it's pretty interesting. Of course, the old standard, the Here Goes to Nothing wild sour. This was our original flagship, honestly. And the Here Goes to Nothing, again, it's kind of a cutesy little name, but we actually, when we were starting this whole process, we kind of, again, threw caution to the wind and said, here goes nothing. And so that's kind of how the beer got its name. So anyway, those are the three that I hope everybody gets to enjoy.
Gentlemen, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Thanks for being a part. Mr. Matt Potts from Distill, Mr. John Laffler from Off Color, Mr. Jeff Sparrow, the guy that wrote the book about wild beers. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being a part of this. We really appreciate it. Cheers.
We are with Beguile Sent with Celebration, a hazy IPA. I have no idea what hops are in it. I can tell you that it's got a nice dank aroma, super hoppy, a little beer oil. It smells like Kevin's underpants.
Cheers, Kevin. All right, Jana, we've got deep thoughts from Old Irving, a two-time winner of the Iron Brewer competition at the Oak Park Microbrew Review. What deep thoughts do you have about this beer?
I think that the Citra and the Simcoe work really nicely together. Definitely goes to show why they also won a gold medal in the Hazy IPA category at GABF. I think they knocked it out of the park with this one.
Cheers, Old Irving.
My pitch was that if we could just brew some small batches of it, have it in the tap room only, give all the proceeds back to cancer research, I'm gonna see if Goose will make this beer with me.
He asked if we could make a hazy IPA with mango and cinnamon, which were the only two flavors he could taste after going through chemo. It took me about 2 seconds to say yes, let's do it.
Honestly, we were a little bit scared. We're like, not because it was a hazy IPA, it was the cinnamon piece. You know, that's the ingredient that's, of course, the oddball.
We love you, Johnny, and if anyone's gonna make us brew a hazy IPA with fucking mango and cinnamon, it'll be you.
And the first batch that we brewed, I think it sold out in a weekend, the 2-barrel batch.
Okay. All right. So here we are with the second virtual Oak Park Microbrew Review to benefit 7 generations ahead. And with me, I have some awesome rock stars in the brewing community. I've got Brant Debovic from Dry Hop Corridor, and I forget the third one, but there's a bunch out there.
Third one's on the shelf until spring, hopefully.
Okay, the third one is the COVID-19 brewery that'll be opening soon.
Yeah.
And then I've got Kevin Carey from Beguile and his rock star brewer, Liz French, who just left. I think she's coming back eventually. There she is.
Yep.
Hello, Liz.
Okay.
So, and Beguile was gracious enough to donate to our last one as well. And great beers. So I'm looking forward to trying this new one. So let's jump right in. Hazy. We spent thousands and thousands of years trying to make beer clear, and suddenly everyone wants it to be cloudy as can be. So I wanted to start with Brent. What are your thoughts on why people enjoy a murky, thick, hazy-ish beer? What is going on here?
I am of the opinion that it is a good gateway beer to the regular IPA style, whereas the hazy / New England style is more on the sweet side and a little bit less bitter. A lot of the complaints I got at Dry Hop and Corridor are that our beers were too bitter. They loved the aroma, but when they went to taste them, they did not like the bitter finish. So I think it really caught lightning in a bottle, basically, with the non-IPA drinkers that wanted to be cool and drink an IPA, but didn't want to be dealing with the 100 IBU bombs and the palate fatigue and everything that goes with the traditional American IPA.
Well, okay, let me ask Liz this then. So based on that, I want your thoughts, Liz. Bitterness has nothing to do with clarity. So what's going on?
That is very true. And I don't know if it is just a reflection of how popular IPAs were in the New England region, how a couple breweries up there were brewing them, and they were brewing them to be hazy, but you can definitely get that kind of aroma without the bitterness and still make a clear beer. We've actually tweaked the hopping profiles of a couple of our pale ales so that they have more of the kind of the late edition Whirlpool dry hop edition hops, way less of any bittering hops, and we kind of get the same effect. But there are definitely some characteristics of the yeast that people use in the hazy IPAs that lend themselves really well to working with that many hops. There's a lot of fruity characteristics that you get from those yeasts that really accentuate the hops, and they also happen to be hazies. So I think that might be where those tie in.
So you're really comparing the ability of the yeast to create those flavors, but you can still make that beer clear, right? So why hazy? Come on, Kevin, give me something. What's going on? Why's it got to be cloudy?
Why does it have to be cloudy? That I'm not sure specifically why. I think I personally, one of the early beers I started drinking was a Hefeweizen style, I guess, or wheat beer when I got into craft beer. So I guess I could see where maybe it is the mouthfeel and the connection between the mouthfeel and the lack of bitterness. I know that a descriptive word that some breweries use is pillowy. With a clear beer, you're going to be more crisp, okay. I think that's more refreshing. So like Liz is talking about, like some of our hoppier, more aromatic ales and IPAs that we've kind of then scaled from, this idea of that the New England IPAs took on. Those are a little bit more crisp, whereas, even a beer like Sent with Celebration that we're drinking today, we tend to actually have a pretty good balance on our hazies where there is a little bit of bitterness, like slight bitterness, I guess, compared to true New England. So we kind of dabble in that, but I think the true to style New England hazies, you get that, it's like fluffy or pillowy mouthfeel that also goes along with the lack of hops. So it's just more drinkable. And I think there's I think a hazy IPA for almost everyone's preference, where if you like something that does, I think I saw a hazy West Coast IPA the other day, which doesn't make sense.
So I'll get Brent here and then Liz. So do you feel that the residual, whether it's oats or wheat or whatever we're using to create this hazy, pillowy feel, attracts the bitterness and makes it more, allows the hops to accentuate more? Is that what we're going for?
Yeah, and I think also the larger Whirlpool edition, as opposed to not adding really any hops at beginning of boil or the 60-minute mark or 15-minute mark even. I mean, with our hazy program, all our hazies are dry hopped at Whirlpool with a pretty abundant, at least a pound per barrel at Whirlpool. Most times maybe more, to really accentuate that the tropical characteristics and the fruity characteristics to interplay with the yeast that we use, like Liz said, gives it great peach notes, great stone fruit notes that complement those tropical notes. So I think that like those late hop additions definitely go a long way to imparting those flavors that people seem to want in the hazy programs.
So is the haziness, is the pillowness, is it you're trying to cover up bitterness? Liz, what's going on here? Tell me.
I don't know that you're necessarily trying to cover up bitterness, but I think some of that also, between the oats that are adding mouthfeel and the mash temperatures that you're using that are quite a bit higher than you would use for a West Coast IPA, you're getting more residual sugar, and that's bringing a little bit of sweetness in. And I think sweetness is a thing that people are looking for in their beers now. I mean, you see sweetness in a hazy IPA, you see sweetness in a pastry stout, in a fruited beer. So I think that people are drifting more towards having a preference for sweetness, whereas 8 or 10 years ago, it was as bitter as you can make it. So I don't know if it's just a shift in consumers' preferences, or if there are new consumers that are entering the craft market that are looking for something different than what we saw during the 10 years ago.
I see, the pastry stouts and things that you mentioned, those are all kind of like one-off, like you're not going to drink that all day but the hazy I feel like the hazy IPA is here to stay. So why is this now it's a session beer. It's now a session beer. People love it. People are clamoring for it, and people are checking the dates on the cans, and they are super excited about when it comes out. So how do you feel about this part of the new hazy movement in the craft brewing industry, and that it has to be super fresh, and that it's actually, I think it's here to stay? How do you feel about it? Liz, you go first.
I think in regards to beers having to be super fresh, I understand that consumers have that information that hoppy beers tend to fade off and develop more off flavors the older that they are. But actually, I would say, based on our experiences, some of our hazy IPAs really hit their stride 3 or 4 weeks after packaging, and that's where some of that bitterness falls off. You really get some much more mellow characteristics from the bittering hops, and a lot more pronounced, the citrus, tropical, stone fruit aromas from those beers. So from that regard, I would say have a month-old hazy IPA. If it's been packaged well at a high quality, it's going to be a great beer.
Kevin?
I would tend to agree with Liz on, I think, fresh beers.
But honestly, Kevin, don't you always?
Yes, that's yes, always. But yeah, I think that we are actually starting to see the freshness thing balance out a little bit. Obviously, everything's been weird the last 10 months, but I do think that there are consumers that are coming around to the idea that hazy IPAs can change over time. That getting the most green, hazy IPA with chunks in it is, not as fancy as it once was. Not to scare anyone, but that has happened for some beers that have been put out there. You still see the hop pellets in the beer, and that's just because people are putting so much in there. But I think for us and what we're trying to accomplish here is, I think we're trying to skew more towards that session hazy that you speak about. Session usually means, low ABV, like 5%. You can drink a few of them. Usually hazy IPAs are going to be, I think, around 7%, probably 7% is one of where I see them coming in. But I think because of the flavor, the balance in the flavor, it's easier to drink a hazy IPA at 7% than it is to drink, a very bitter IPA at 7%. Obviously, the alcohol content is going to sneak up on you, but I think because of the flavors and, as you tend to get like a balance between the pillowy and like, more sessionable, you can drink a few of them.
All right, Brant, man, your hazy program at your brew pubs. Let's we're wrapping this up. What's your favorite hop? What's your favorite beer you got going on? What's happening?
Yeah. As far as the freshness question, also as a brew pub brewer and not really a packaging brewery, we'll transfer, and we won't serve the beer probably for 4 or 5 days, because we find if we put it on the next day that we get that really green bitterness from the hops that are left in suspension. So we like to give it 2 or 3 days. So as far as the freshness goes, we really don't like serving it right the day after. We like to give it maybe 3 or 4 days to like mellow out a little bit and get rid of that hop bite a little bit. Today we brewed Squeeze It. So Squeeze It's what we I guess made our bones with in the hazy program. So we brewed that today. So we got Squeeze It coming back for the first time in about 3 or 4 months at Corridor. Also at Corridor, Cosmic Juice Box has been probably without a doubt our best seller in the pandemic. Crowler wise, usually we're selling about 3 times the amount of crowlers of Cosmic Juice Box compared to everything else. I'm finding that what little traffic we have sitting outside and drinking are more inclined to stick with Wizard Fight, our traditional American IPA, and some of our easier drinking selections, usually a Dortmunder or a Pilsner does really well. And we find that our takeout business is like booming because people just see it on DoorDash. They just see a hazy on DoorDash and want it. no question. We do a report every week, and our top 2 growlers selling every week are hazies. Over at Dry Hop, we brought Neon Werewolf, which did really well at Crushed by Giants. Before we had to shut down due to the pandemic and no indoor seating. We didn't have any patio space there. So we migrated Neon Werewolf up to Dry Hop, and that's been doing really, really well there.
Well, that's all awesome. And I am so glad that everyone's doing the best they can at this point with what's going on. Thanks for your time. I can't wait to have a beer with you in a more brewery setting that we're used to. But we'll get there. But thanks a lot, Kevin. Thanks a lot, Liz. Thanks a lot, Brent. You guys are all awesome. Your beers are great, and I appreciate it. And again, we got Dry Hop and Corridor Brewing and Beguile Brewing. Get beer to go. Get some growlers. Get some crowlers. Get some 6-packs. Support local beer, and I really appreciate everybody. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Pete.
Peace.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Hey, I'm Keith from Kinslogger Brewing. We're located in Oak Park. We specialize in lager fermentation, and today I'm here to tell you about a beer we call Chicago Common. This is a beer that we set out to create something new with, something that didn't fit any of the established style guidelines, and we used this brick as our inspiration. This is a Chicago Common. You see these all over Chicagoland, mostly on the backs and the sides of buildings, but they're everywhere. They were made from local clay and were the cheap building material that used to build the city up after a great fire. So what we wanted to do was try to represent that in beer form. Start off with this deep red color bricks, fuller body, a little higher alcohol at 7.5%, representing that structural strength component. The hops that we use are earthy, piney, again, reinforcing this building material concept. And we have a nice dose of rye and a rich malty body there to help balance out that hop flavor. We think it's a delicious beer. I hope you enjoy it as well. Thanks for supporting 7 Generations Ahead, and cheers. If you'd like to get more of the beer beyond what you found in your pack, you can get it at your local specialty beer shop, or you can reach us at kinslogger.com in order for a pickup at the brewery. Cheers and happy 2021.
All right, we're on to exit strategy. Forest Park, Illinois, Posthumulus. What were the hops? Chinook and Azaka. I got it.
And we have the Bling It On, which is a kettle sour with blueberry, Meyer lemon, and vanilla. Yum. Woo!
Hi, this is James from Malta Brewing Company, and this is Sweatawetta, a 7.5% ABV stout with oats for mouthfeel, lactose for sweetness, and roasted chocolate and caramel malts for roasted chocolate and caramel flavors. You can find this beer and many others at our tap room in Downers Grove, or our new Altar Brewing and Kitchen in St. Charles, Illinois.
All right, well, that was a really fun hour and a half and delicious beers. Thanks again to all the brewers for all their time and energy and their efforts and making these great liquids. And thanks again to everyone else that helped put this on. And I think we got a little musical guest here. What's going up next, Gary?
Well, we're really excited to have Katie Cole back. Katie is a dear friend of the Oak Park Microbrew Review. She's an Australian-born singer and songwriter. She tours as a keyboard player and vocalist for the Smashing Pumpkins, but also has her own solo acoustic vocal career. And you'll find Katie to have a beautiful voice, just an engaging personality. And Katie, we're really excited to have you back again. So please take it away.